In the history till date, scientists of the world have done different types of experiments, some of which were successful and some were unsuccessful. But some such experiments were also done which remain a mystery even today. The results of these experiments were even horrific that shook the humanity. So in today's video we will tell you about top 10 mysterious science experiments in history which should never be done. The Russian sleep experiment is a chilling internet urban legend that gained popularity online. The story revolves around a group of test subjects who underwent a sleep deprivation experiment in the late 1940s, or early 1950s in Soviet Russia. As the legend goes, a group of 5 political prisoners volunteered to participate in an experiment that aimed to test the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation. The subjects were kept in a sealed environment and provided with a gas that prevented them from sleeping. Initially, everything seemed fine, but as the experiment progressed, the subjects began to display alarming behavior. They experienced extreme paranoia, started exhibiting psychotic symptoms, and became increasingly unhinged. Some versions of the story describe gruesome and horrifying acts committed by the subjects against themselves and others. According to the legend, the researchers monitoring the experiment were also affected by the disturbing behavior of the subjects. Eventually, the experimenters decided to terminate the study, but when they attempted to enter the chamber, they found the subjects had gruesomely mutilated themselves and each other. The subjects had sustained severe injuries but were somehow still alive. It's important to note that the Russian sleep experiment is considered a work of fiction, an internet creepypasta that has no factual basis. There is no credible evidence or historical documentation supporting the existence of such an experiment, or the events described in the story. Deep within the historic confines of Camp Hero Air Force Base lies a tale shrouded in mystery and intrigue. Officially designated as a defense stronghold safeguarding the East Coast against Nazi incursions during the harrowing days of World War II, the shadows deepen upon closer inspection. Post-war machinations unraveled a clandestine maneuver by the United States, wherein they sought the expertise of Nazi scientists for a dark array of innovations. These enigmatic minds found themselves ensconced within the very grounds of Camp Hero, tasked with sculpting the enigmatic Montauk Project. Legends and rumors encircle the Montauk Project, painting a portrait of a covert governmental enterprise snatching runaway children to serve as human guinea pigs. Whispers spoke of mind control experiments, weaving tales of temporal manipulation, interstellar voyages, and the reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technologies. But this isn't a mere tale spun from the ether of fiction. No, the fabric of reality frays at the edges, revealing threads of truth. The annals of history bear witness to Cultra and the Holmesburg prison experiments, unveiled secrets that paint a chilling picture of government-sponsored mind control programs. The echoes of Project Stargate resonate, a clandestine endeavor fostering a cadre of powerful psychics, a venture underwritten by the very hand of the government. In 1995, amidst hearings and revelations, President Bill Clinton's somber apology pierced through the veil of secrecy.
Of embarrassment, and that was wrong. Those who led the government when these decisions were made are no longer here to take responsibility for what they did. They're not here to apologize to the survivors, the family members of the communities whose lives were darkened by the shadow of the atom and these choices. So today, on behalf of another generation of American leaders and another generation of American citizens, the United States of America offers a sincere apology to those of our citizens who were subjected to these experiments, to their families, and to their communities.
Can regular people do really bad things? That's what a man named Stanley Milgram wanted to understand in 1961. He was curious about how people could commit terrible acts, like those in Nazi Germany, just because someone in charge told them to. Milgram created an experiment to test this. He had 3 people, an authority figure, called the experimenter, a volunteer, the teacher, and a person pretending to be the victim, the student. The volunteer was told to ask questions to the student and give them electric shocks if they answered wrong. The shocks could be dangerously strong, up to 450 volts. Before starting, Milgram asked his colleagues what they thought would happen. They believed only a few volunteers would obey and give high shocks. What do you think? Would you do it? People signed up for the experiment without knowing what it truly involved. They were then made to believe they were randomly chosen to be the teacher. They were given a small shock themselves to experience what it felt like. The teacher and student couldn't see each other. The teacher had to ask questions, and if the student answered wrong, they were told to give a shock. But here's the catch, the student wasn't actually shocked. It was all a trick with recorded sounds. The experimenter, in a lab coat to look powerful, would push the teacher to keep shocking the student, even if the teacher felt uncomfortable. Many volunteers got really stressed, some even laughed nervously or sweated a lot. Milgram discovered that all the volunteers gave at least 300 volts, and 65% gave the maximum 450 volts. Some criticized his experiment for being unethical because it made people do things that seemed violent. He said something interesting. Maybe we are like puppets controlled by society, but being aware of this might help us break free. During World War II, the Atlantic Ocean was a treacherous arena, notably targeted by German submarines aiming at American ships. To safeguard Allied vessels, the United States Navy purportedly commenced a covert initiative known as the Philadelphia Experiment. This project, conducted in 1943 at the Philadelphia shipyard, aimed initially at concealing Navy ships, intending to render them invisible to radar detection. The experiment centered on a U.S. Navy destroyer subjected to peculiar tests. The theory posited that enveloping the vessel in intense electromagnetic fields might distort its visibility enough to render it invisible. On October 28, 1943, scientists encased the USS Eldridge, manned by a full crew, in electrified copper wire to commence the experiment. However, the experiment went awry. Witnesses claimed that after the activation of the experiment, chaos erupted aboard the USS Eldridge. The ship purportedly vanished in a green mist, reappeared in Norfolk, Virginia, then subsequently back in Philadelphia. A merchant mariner named Carl M. Allen supposedly witnessed these occurrences. Allegedly, the crew suffered dire consequences. Some were found dead, while others were discovered embedded within the ship's walls, but still alive. Speculations arose about the crew being frozen in time or trapped within the vessel, suggesting a distortion of space-time due to the experiment's alleged teleportation effects. Accounts that emerged years later asserted that the USS Eldridge not only traveled hundreds of miles, but also seemingly transcended decades into the future. Reports claimed sightings of the ship in different locations and times, such as Chicago in 1969 and Lake Mead in 1983, suggesting an unexpected form of time travel. The Eldridge's erratic movements across time seemingly implied an uncontrolled traversal across temporal boundaries, suggesting an unprecedented and rough manifestation of time travel. In the shadow of the Cold War's icy grip, the CIA clandestinely birthed a monstrous endeavor, MKUltra, a macabre initiative shrouded in secrecy, dedicated to unraveling the enigma of mind control. This sinister chapter propelled psychiatric institutions across the United States and Canada into a twisted realm, where unsuspecting souls became unwitting subjects of abhorrent experiments. Under the cloak of the CIA's directives, patients, prisoners, and even unwitting members of the public were thrust into a nightmarish realm. Psychedelic drugs, sensory deprivation, electroshock treatment, all became tools in the relentless pursuit of dominance over the human mind. Operation Midnight Climax emerged as a haunting chapter, a network of deceit where unspeakable acts transpired within the walls of rigged apartments. Men lured by prostitutes found themselves unwittingly drugged with LSD, becoming subjects of voyeuristic observation by CIA scientists behind mirrored surfaces. Acid tests, surreal parties veiled in psychedelic haze, unwittingly gave birth to the countercultural movements that would redefine an era. Yet, the darkest tendrils of MKUltra extended to the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Canada. There, under the twisted stewardship of Dr. Ewan Cameron, unsuspecting patients, some grappling with common ailments, were thrust into a maelstrom of invasive drug cocktails and grotesque methodologies. Dr. Cameron's cruel experiments, termed depatterning and psychic driving, stripped victims of their very essence, reducing them to blank slates upon which the doctor inscribed his twisted designs. A relentless barrage of insulin comas, sensory assaults, and unimaginable electroshocks, administered without mercy, etched permanent scars upon shattered lives. The trauma inflicted by MKUltra's vile experimentation tore families asunder. Loved ones returned mere shadows, ravaged by the Institute's atrocities, their memories, identities, and futures forever ravaged. The truth of MKUltra, veiled in secrecy, belatedly surfaced, thanks to the courage of a whistleblower. Congressional hearings exposed the CIA's dark deeds, though accountability and reparation for the survivors remained elusive. Today, the scars of MKUltra endure, carried by the survivors and their kin, a testament to humanity's darkest foray into mind manipulation. Unseen chapters persist, hidden within the folds of history, leaving survivors and their families in silent agony, seeking justice that may forever elude them. Nicolae Minovici, a Romanian forensic scientist and criminologist, served as the head of his country's anthropological service, and gained renown for his extensive research on the physical effects of hanging on the human body. He founded the Legal Medicine Association of Romania and acted as the publisher of the Romanian Journal of Legal Medicine. His groundbreaking studies involved conducting multiple hanging experiments, some on himself, each lasting around 5 seconds. His aim was to understand the physiological impact when a person dies by hanging. Minovici conducted 12 hanging experiments using himself as the subject. Employing a dynamometer attached to a knot around his neck, he explored various knot positions, observing associated phenomena like visual disturbances, changes in skin color, ringing in his ears, and the rapidity of symptom onset. He also attempted between 6 and 7 hangings with the help of assistants, only feeling pain when his feet lost contact with the ground. During these experiments, an assistant pulled the rope while audibly counting the allotted time. Initially, the knot used was not constricting, and Minovic's feet were 2 meters above the ground. Through a series of progressive experiments lasting longer than the previous ones, he managed to hang for a maximum of 25 seconds. However, in his final experiment using a regular, constricting hangman's knot, he could only endure 4 seconds before signaling his aides to stop. Despite keeping his feet on the ground during this trial, he experienced swallowing pain for a month afterward. Ultimately, Minovic's pioneering research not only contributed significantly to forensic science, but also sparked crucial discussions on humane practices within legal and judicial systems. His commitment to unraveling the mysteries surrounding hanging remains a testament to his dedication to advancing scientific knowledge and enhancing the understanding of the human condition in extreme circumstances. The monster study was a stuttering experiment performed on 22 orphan children in Davenport, Iowa in 1939. It was conducted by Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa. Graduate student Mary Tudor conducted the experiment under Johnson's supervision. Half of the children received positive speech therapy, praising the fluency of their speech, and the other half, negative speech therapy, belittling the children for speech imperfections. Many of the normal-speaking orphan children who received negative therapy in the experiment suffered negative psychological effects, and some retained speech problems for the rest of their lives. It was dubbed the Monster Study, as some of Johnson's peers were horrified that he would experiment on orphan children to confirm a hypothesis. The experiment was kept hidden, for fear Johnson's reputation would be tarnished in the wake of human experiments conducted by the Nazis during World War II. Because the results of the study were never published in any peer-reviewed journal, Tudor's thesis is the only official record of the details of the experiment. The University of Iowa publicly apologized for the monster study in 2001. However, Patricia Zabrowski, University of Iowa assistant professor of speech pathology and audiology, notes that the data that resulted from the experiment is the largest collection of scientific information on the phenomenon of stuttering, and that Johnson's work was the first to discuss the importance of the stutterer's thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, and feelings, and continues to influence views on stuttering greatly. Do you want the world to colonize space? Good. Now do you want it enough to spend an entire year lying flat on your back in bed? At least some people did. Boris Marukov decided to be a cosmonaut, so naturally, he was an overachiever. His path to space included a medical degree, and studies in cardiology, gastroenterology, ophthalmology, and otolaryngology. Perhaps he felt that he still hadn't distinguished himself enough. Or perhaps he really wanted to find out if it was possible for humans to colonize space. Whatever the reason, he organized what NASA calls a 370-day experiment dedicated to the experimental testing of a countermeasure complex for prolonged space flights. We might call it a bunch of miserable people lying flat in bed for over a year. Studies of this kind are done even today, and their participants are generally well compensated. They have to be, because this isn't the equivalent of lazing in bed for the day. Participants never sit up, not to make themselves more comfortable, not to bathe, not to eat, and not to go to the bathroom. The point is to simulate the effects of microgravity on the human body, and those effects are not good. Loss of muscle and bone is just the beginning. People also lose function in their internal organs, including the heart, which slows as it doesn't have to push blood up against the force of gravity, and have trouble digesting. At least, though, the astronauts got to go into space. Marukov's cosmonauts just sat in bed, watching television, and hating life. They had some relief. After about 4 months, some were allowed to do muscle-clenching exercises while still sitting in bed. Others walked on a vertical treadmill placed at the foot of their beds. The idea was to see if the well-known deterioration of the body could be countered by these exercises. However much the exercises helped, they weren't enough to keep the 11 subjects fit. After the end of the experiment, they spent a further 2 months learning to walk again. The subjects went through a lot. Towards the end, they were put in a centrifuge to simulate the pressure of landing back on Earth. The Stanford Prison Experiment was a psychological study conducted by Stanford University in 1971. This experiment was conducted to test the effects of authority and power on human behavior. Participants for the experiment were recruited through an advertisement in local newspapers that promised $15 a day to male students willing to participate in a psychological study of prison life. As a result of which 20 healthy male students expressed their wish, who were randomly assigned the roles of a prisoner and a prison guard. Inmates were housed in a mock prison in the basement of Stanford's psychology building, and prison guards were given uniforms and plastic batons. The experiment was to last for 2 weeks, but it was terminated after 6 days, as the prison guards became increasingly brutal towards the prisoners and the prisoners became increasingly submissive. Experiments showed how easily people can be corrupted by power. Scientists at Stanford conducted an extraordinary experiment by implanting human brain tissue, specifically cerebral organoids or mini-brains, into rats. Their aim was to understand if the human neurons would integrate with the rat's brain sufficiently to influence its behavior and respond to external stimuli, such as whisker tickling. These miniature human brain structures, grown from reprogrammed skin cells in lab settings, typically serve as crucial models for studying brain disorders. When neurons are grown in vitro, they form neural networks similar to those in a developing brain, albeit lacking essential blood supply and chemical signals present in a real brain. For a more accurate understanding of complex brain processes and their impact on behavior, such organoids must be grown in vivo, attached to a living organism. So, the researchers transplanted these organoids into young rat brains, allowing the human brain tissue to grow 9 times its original size within 3 months. This growth was facilitated by the rat's blood vessels, which supported the human brain cells. The transplanted organoids displayed changes in gene expression, resembling patterns observed in human fetal brains of similar developmental stages. However, these organoids, though displaying some progression similar to prenatal human brains, still lack the distinct layers found in the human cortex. Nevertheless, they proved invaluable in modeling brain disorders.